Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Western Spirit. And today we have someone who's very important to the Western Spirit, Peter Boghossian. Peter serves as the executive director of the National Progress Alliance and founding faculty advisor of the University of Austin. And I just realized that we've had on a number of people from the University of Austin, including Neil Ferguson and Ayan
Oh,
Hirsi
great.
Ali. Just last week we had Ayan on. So, Peter, it's a pleasure speaking to you finally.
Great. Well, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I hear all the names and they're friends of mine and great people. So
So you're in
yeah,
good
I'm
company.
happy to talk to you today.
So, Peter, we said before, and I think it's true. We don't want to talk here in this conversation about the actual conflict. What I do want to, where I am in Israel, what I do want to talk to you about is of the reaction to it in the West. So, after October 7th, the day after, even the day of, in my dad lives in New York City.
Yeah.
Long story. And there was protests right there before Israel even responded of people hating Jews, pro Hamas, pro this. So maybe explain to us why you think this is happening and since then.
Oh God, what a question. What a question. What a question. That is a very long,
Yes.
very complicated question. Boy, that is quite the question. Okay, let's see if I can simplify this this is the kind of question that no matter how you answer it, no matter what you say, people are going to be upset because that you did not mention their pet theory for why this is happening. So, okay, okay, I'm already stymied. I'm stymied into the
Maybe
first
we'll take
question.
it. Let's take it one step at a
No, no,
time.
no. I'll,
You
I'll
want
answer it.
to
Answer
go
it. Here
for
we
it?
go. So
Okay.
this is my honest opinion. If my mentor taught me this, my mentor is actually a Buchenwald survivor,
Wow.
and he went back and he liberated Frank Wesley was his name, but his German name was Franz Wolfson, and he went back and liberated the concentration camp. He told me a story one day where he said he walked in and he said, "This is one of the stupidest classes I've ever had. I cannot believe how many stupid people in this class." And people were shocked that he said that. And somebody very timidly said, Frank, you can't say that. You can't say that we're stupid." And he said, "Well, can I say that you're smart?" And the people said, "Yes." And then Frank said, "Well, you the whole concept of smart doesn't make sense if you unless you have people who are stupid, and stupid doesn't make sense if you have people who are smart." And so my hypothesis for why this is I think that by and large people hate Jews because they're smart. But the problem is that nobody is speaking honestly about it, because the moment that you say that one group of people is smart, that must mean other groups of people are dumb.
Mm.
And the problem is we have a kind of weird lopsided egalitarianism that nobody wants to make that admission. But we know from IQs, the average Ashkenazi IQ, and it's even a hierarchy among Jews, Ashkenazi, Sephardic, etc. So we know that it's 109, right? Whites are hovering around 100. In fact, whites, they even use the baseline. That's why it's 100 in a Gaussian distribution. Anyway, so the point is, I think that a lot of it is fueled by,
Envy?
yes, certainly envy, to be sure. But like when you look at people who are financially successful, they're disproportionately, of the people who are Jews, they're disproportionately. But that's not because Jews have space lasers or because they're in some kind of conspiracy. It's just because in capitalist systems, smarter people tend to make more money.
Yes.
And again, I'm going to say the word. Nobody wants to hear the word, but dumb people and stupid people do not make as much in general in capitalist systems. That does not mean there are not outliers. Of course, there are outliers. There are poor Ashkenazi Jews, and there are rich people who are of other
You're
backgrounds.
looking at one here.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Well, I proved my point. So you're an
Exactly.
outlier. But I do think a lot of it is envy. I think a lot of it is uh, um, jealousy, and a lot of it is when you can't explain something, particularly if you don't have the intellectual wherewithal to explain something.
Mhm.
You see conspiracy theories everywhere. Well, these people are in cahoots with there's some kind of vast Jewish conspiracy for No, there is no Jewish conspiracy. You just have a bunch of smart people working in capitalist systems. That only applies in capitalist systems, by the way.
Right. And Peter, can I also maybe one of the things that you have focused on a lot, if remembering the studies that you did with James Lindsay, who was also on our program a while back, about like how a lot of the academia has become a grievance industry,
That's
meaning
exactly what it is.
right. So, meaning, let me just, I want to see if you agree with me. So, let's say Israel is here and our neighbors are Palestinians. Israel is very successful as a country, small, against all odds, around enemies around us with all our problems. And the Palestinians are poor. They get tons of money in international aid and they can't seem to, before October 7th, even bring themselves up. Also, we're considered white for some reason. My wife is definitely not white. She's Iraqi and Persian descent, but whatever, white adjacent, they say, I think. And the Palestinians are considered not white or brown or whatever. And so you have this dynamic where if someone is successful and another one is unsuccessful, the successful is automatically in the wrong, right?
Yeah. So this really doesn't need to be any more complicated than it is. And you pretty much put your finger on it. I think heuristic would be you have oppressed and oppressors. Again, this topic is so complicated, and I'll talk for a minute about the complication. But the bottom line is you have oppressed and oppressors. People who are successful, it is taught that they didn't get there through their own merits. These people despise merits, and so you do have a grievance industry. You have whole lines of literature about how oppressed and oppression and Jews are viewed as not Israelis, Jews. There's a difference. They're viewed as oppressors. Even Jews who don't live in Israel are still oppressors. So you're looking at you have a very serious problem, and I have to say I find myself increasingly angry about this problem on a number of different levels. But that's the basic idea.
Hmm. And Peter, one, could you also talk about maybe just the fact that these people that are very, I don't know the word, do you think the right word would be woke, or maybe that's like the slang, like it's sort of do you think that they also hate themselves, meaning a lot of these people are usually, I mean, it's just a observatory fact, and you walk on the streets and talk with them a lot of times on your videos, which are amazing, and a lot of them are just white middle class people who and it seems they should be all hating themselves.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think the whole concept of who hates whom is. You ever watch the show Oz? It was on HBO a few years ago, like maybe 10 years ago. Anyway, it's interesting. It was a show about prisons. And in this show, it was a multiracial, multi ethnic cast. And there was a one episode in which there was a race riot or a race war was going to happen that would lead to a race riot between whites and blacks. And there was a Jewish guy who didn't know which group to go to. And he was sitting, he was sitting, that's funny. Yeah, right. Because you understand. So he was sitting at the table with these white guys who were members of the actual far right, unlike what everybody is called. Anybody who has the slightest divergent opinion is now a right wing maniac. But these guys were like actually right wingers in the show. And the main white supremacist put his arm on the table and he said, "You're white, I'm white. Those people aren't white." And I thought, wow, like whoever wrote that has no idea whatsoever. I mean, the main target of white supremacists is Jews. The secondary target is blacks. They don't view blacks as a worthy, like Matt Hale had a lot of work that he's now in prison, the former white supremacist, or probably still current, but leader of a white supremacist group. They don't view blacks as being intellectually capable enough to be their adversaries. And they view Jews who have, and this is correct historically, who have given minorities rights and fought for civil rights. They view Jews as part of the problem to give blacks rights so then there can be miscegenation because they believe this idea that when Jews intermarry and the right white race is polluted, that will give Jews a permanent hierarchy in the social echelon. But so whoever wrote that scene, they just didn't understand. I mean, even at a most rudimentary level. So I think it's less about self hatred and more about the waters are so muddy with what is right wing and left wing, and nobody's, who's a Nazi. Everybody's a Nazi. This guy's a Nazi. Like nobody is. The linguistic waters are very muddy.
And then when an actual Nazi comes, everyone's like, "Yeah, everyone's a Nazi, so who cares?" That's yeah. I want to ask you, you about academia. So one of the things when I grew up in an ultra Orthodox Jewish family in Brooklyn, New York, Hasidic family. So I never grew up studying any academia. When I came to Israel, and finally I took off my hat, the jacket, the beard. I went to university, did my thesis, whatever. But I don't think I ever thought of it until in the last maybe 5, 6 years about how it, academics, it seems to me, instead of looking at the world in a more like everything's complicated. You're trying to understand complications. They've watered down their worldview to be less complicated than the regular schmo in the street.
100%.
What happened?
Oh boy, you're asking these. You ask such a huge
Give me a
question.
little bit like
You ask huge
why is
questions.
this? Why could an
Um,
academic who's spent his whole life in university studying these things that he thinks are so important, so that humanity needs his help because they're very egotistical, and they think they're there to help solve humanity's problems, and they water it down to, like you said, oppressor and oppressed. Things are way more complicated than oppressor and oppressed at any situation.
yeah, I think you have it backward. It's not, well, how did this happen to a smart person? It's because they're smart and you get groups of really smart people together. That's what you get. I wrote published a piece called "Deluded Departments" where I talk about that they're not the gatekeepers of reason or rationality, particularly philosophers. When you get really smart groups of people, or midwits at the very least, let's just take out at the very least, you get a bunch of midwits together and you have a kind of university architecture that supports certain things and punishes certain things. Like Title IX and other federal civil rights laws started very well. That they started with the best of intention. You can't have someone in class screaming the N-word at a black person who's in class, and or sexual allegations. You can't have, you know beyond the norms of decorum. But then that quickly led to other things, and so I think the one way to look at it is that because they're midwits and because they get together with other midwits, they hone their moral saw, if you will. And so with that saw, they cut off. I'm trying to extend the branch of the saw, but they the metaphor, they kind of cut off people from the tree who are, bad apples, or not good. So you do that long enough, and you start to live in an echo chamber of other midwits who believe the same things as you do, and then you have speech codes that prevent you from hearing any views whatsoever that contradict that. And then again, remember the kids that they're getting kids in who have themselves been indoctrinated. And particularly, to answer your question directly, they've been indoctrinated by Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed. This idea that's ubiquitous in this is also something no one talks about in colleges of education and teacher training. So to answer your question, you're already getting students who believe this stuff because they've been indoctrinated. The whole thing is an indoctrination mill. All of it. It's just one big indoctrination factory.
So I saw you on a different podcast, and Dad, I think his Dad Saves America or
Oh
something
yeah,
like
good
that.
dude, John Papola. Yeah.
Yeah, and you said something there that I have to ask you about, which I said it also, but probably not as nice as you did. He asked you about the fact that something to the effect that people less go now in the West and in the U.S. specifically, less to church, to synagogue, to they have no sense of, at least the way I look at it, sense of community and meaning, and instead they're going to this woke stuff. This it's giving them like a sense of we had Coleman Hughes on, and he said that when he was in Colombia, they would knock on the door of the people the first day they got there to the dorms and say, "Come to this protest because we're all as a community and we're fighting something good." And no one even knew what they were fighting. They just needed that sense of belonging. Do you think that's something that you could connect that sort of a new religion of war?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just had dinner with Coleman a few weeks ago, and I spoke to him about something similar. And he has particularly good insights in that. And he moves in a way that I cannot when it comes to those conversations. Um, so that's called the substitution hypothesis. And as I've said before, I don't know if I came up with that term or what have you, but it's gained some traction. But the basic idea is that people have turned to the new religion because they've stopped believing in the old religion. And many people blame the new atheist movement directly for this. And because I was very much into the new atheist movement, my book, my writings, my lectures, my talks, etc. But they blame me, they blame me directly for this because they think that if we had just shut up, a benign form of Christianity would have prevented things like children's genitals being mutilated and all kinds of other obscenities and really horrific things happening.
So it's you. I was thinking about it's you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll pull a card from their deck and claim that I am a victim. I am a victim. I did not think that people would go directly to Crazy Town. So, but I don't think society is worse off from having more rational, sane, reasonable people. I think that the conditions were ripe for extra layers of crazy on top of the crazy that already was latent in the society. It just needed to emerge from some precipitating event.
But it's because you do agree that it's because people left the old less crazy, let's say, and they didn't come to you, let's say. They came instead of going one way, they went to the crazy way even more, right? It's like they needed something.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with my own hypothesis or not. uh, it could be. I asked Dawkins about that. I've asked Dawkins, Shermer. I've asked a bunch of people about that, and most people think it's not true because if it were true, there'd be no point to work toward a reasonable, rational, scientifically based civil society because people would just always go to crazy town and whatever the next fad was. But I think what's super interesting about that is that everybody has the potential to live a life of reason and become sane. They just need certain, interventions to allow that to happen.
Exactly. And do you think that is the reason that they shut off debate? So that's also one of the things that you speak about a lot is the need for debate between ideas in a setting that you're not being shut down if you say certain words. I had a friend, this is who is a former combat veteran here, and he's actually in reserves now. But he was invited in Berkeley to give a speech at some organization, and he flew all the way from Israel to Berkeley, and he gets to Berkeley. It's a long flight. He gets there, he lands, and then he realizes that the university is shutting down his thing because they couldn't provide security because the students there said they would kill him basically. And so, right, and so then they had another place that was like right outside the campus, and students came there and like destroyed the event also. So there was no event in the end. The guy had to fly all the way back here to the Middle East. His like,
Yeah. So I'm gonna be blunt with you. I'm gonna tell you something that's frustrating to me, and I don't mean this as a personal attack on you. I just mean this in general. Where were the Jewish people when the white people? Yeah,
I agree.
you agree.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, all of my Jewish friends agree as well.
So, but you have specific Jewish friends. So
Yeah, but
most
most of my
Jews in
friends
the
are Jewish. Yeah.
right, but most Jews in the U.S. are progressive on the left side, who up until October 7th were allies with the BLM, with a lot of these other. So it's a big problem. I think a lot of them. Yeah, I agree.
And
It
you
is a
don't have to
problem.
be a conservative or liberal, as I've repeatedly say. It's not a liberal or conservative idea. I'll tell you something else I've told my Jewish friends. So I'm speaking to you here from the country of Hungary, and I happen to be in Budapest. I have a couple of Jewish friends here in Budapest. None of those people wear Stars of David. as far as I know, at least visibly. So maybe they were now. But if they did, it wouldn't even occur to me. I wouldn't say a thing to them. Nothing. Now, my friends in New York, I have told. I had a guy on the show from London who wore a visible Star of David, and I have, I've spoken to this my friend who owns a comedy club, Noam Dworman, and my other Jewish friends. I think that that is idiotic.
To wear the Star of David?
Yeah. Okay. Well, any symbol at all that you're Jewish is insane to me because you have people who want to kill you. So why would you intentionally? Why would you place yourself in that situation? That's just completely crazy to me.
Well, speaking as someone who has a yarmulke, so when I come to the US, I never actually, I was there about a year ago in New York. It was the first time I felt a little bit weird about it, like because I grew up as a total Hasidic guy. And there's no way you could have thought I wasn't Jewish, maybe Amish, but I never felt threatened in New York at all, even though I was during the Crown Heights riots, a child in Crown Heights. So we had people beating up Jews, but it never felt to me, at least, maybe I'm looking back differently, but like it is now, like where people are literally protesting outside my old synagogue in Crown Heights just because they're Jewish. They're anti-Zionist Jews in Crown Heights. Hasidic Jews don't support Israel in terms of the country, the state, and they're still protesting against synagogues. So
And
yeah,
they were screaming at. Reed and I were there a few months ago. They were screaming at people. They didn't even know if they were Jews outside of a deli.
yes, it's so stereotypical.
Yeah, it strikes me as crazy, frankly, that people. I had a buddy of mine years ago. He told me this story. I did jujitsu with him. It's like basically like wrestling, and he had a Star of David tattooed on him, and his so I guess it can't means he can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery, but his grandfather saw the Star of David, and his grandfather was interned in. I think he was interned in Auschwitz, but it could have been Treblinka. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. And his grandfather had a spontaneous nosebleed when he saw the tattoo for obvious reasons, right? So, I just I don't know if it's that people don't understand that you must understand that like people hate you for no other reason that you're you and they're filled with rage, and they're getting support from this in the academies, in the school system, and their peer group, from certainly from legacy media. My goodness, if it wasn't for X, we'd have no idea what was going on in most places. So I don't know. I guess it's just a little thing to your people who watch the show. And I know that you're going to have a bunch of people say, well, fuck you, Boghossian, I'm going to wear a star. Well, you wear whatever you want. It's a free country. You can do whatever you want. I just think it's ill-advised. In the same way that I think going out into the street and burning a Quran is ill-advised, and recording yourself. And you're certainly welcome to do that, in my opinion. But I wouldn't suggest it. It's probably not a good idea.
Well, I would just say that this is a discussion which is actually pretty sad that's happening within a lot of the Jewish community, meaning people might attack you, but I've heard Jews talking like that. So it's like people might attack Peter Boghossian for saying this looking out from the outside, but people inside, when I went to the US, people said, yeah, I don't wear my yarmulke anymore because I don't need to be looked behind my back everywhere I'm going. But on the other hand, people are saying, why should we give into this? Why should we
Well,
allow this
because
to?
because you have a 2,000 years of knowing why you should give into it.
Well, yeah, so that's the argument. But let
Yeah.
me ask you another, like, sort of the same thing. So, um, since Trump was elected, we've seen a sort of rift in the American right that's come full force. James talked about it with me when he was here about what he calls the woke right. Jordan Peterson had him on, and there's a number of, you can see the rift within even what's called, I guess, the MAGA movement. Even though I don't even know what that is, even because everyone says he's MAGA, and so there's no real MAGA because everything is MAGA. But where do you think that there is a problem of woke right, or is it something else?
I've never talked about it even once. I've never tweeted about it. It's something that I find so incredibly uninteresting. I will say, are there people on the right who use tactics of people on the left? Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that you've seen with have you followed the Trump Musk split at all? Yeah. So I think, yeah, how could you not? Anybody who's plugged in followed it. One of the things that excuse me, we've seen is another schism or fault line in which I am clearly on one side of that, and that is I was against the big beautiful bill wholeheartedly. I read it's a massive bill. I read some of it. It was huge. I am against doing anything that increases the deficit, and unless it's of indispensable, and even then I'm against it. So I think the other schism in the country was, where should we prioritize debt? And most of the MAGA people, if not a defining characteristic of MAGA, is like, well, screw, we don't really care about the debt. We have these other priorities. And my response to those people is, that's insane. It's short-sighted. It's almost, I wouldn't use the word betrayal, but it's coming very close to a betrayal of the republic. It's certainly taxing your kids into oblivion.
It's betraying your next generations.
That is exactly what I believe it is, but I try not to use that word because it's quite strong. Um, so that's another schism in I mean, we have, so now that woke is declining or in hospice, we see other people. I think was telling Glenn Beck this a while ago. It's like two people who hated each other for a long time. It's like the World of Warcraft thing. There's the two people, two tribes that hated each other, and then the aliens come down and they start killing everybody who's human. And then the two tribes who hated each other said, "Listen, we've got to work together against these crazy people." And they actually really like working together against the crazy people, the aliens. But now that they've defeated the aliens, all of these old tribalisms and schisms and fractures and ancient, and that's not an exaggeration to say ancient enmities, started re-arising.
Right. So, can you maybe do you think it's an economics thing with it? Because I agree with you that it's very weird that they're saying we're going to make America great again, but on the other side, on the other hand, they're not willing to do the difficult things that will make America great again. You need to, bite your lips, so to speak, now in order so that you could be prosperous in the future, instead of being like pouring money in now in order to, you know, I think it's like not even, might not even be a decade, according to some people, where the economy could collapse because of a debt crisis. So do you
Yeah,
think?
no one knows exactly, because they'll all say it depends. But I mean, you're looking for at 1/5 of every dollar, excuse me, to the interest to 1/4, and the projection, excuse me, is 2030. But that doesn't assume increased debt spending. I think a lot of it is mathematical illiteracy and innumeracy, and I think a lot of it is that people just don't understand. Nobody wants to anger their constituency or they won't get in again. I think Paul Rossi tweeted the something that was a great tweet, something like, the arc of democracy is long and it ends in insolvency.
Yes, exactly. It's, well, people like their free stuff. It's it's an, I think it's a human thing. You don't see who's paying for it, when the debt is going to come in, when the banker is going to come knock on the door. We'll eat and drink because tomorrow, who
Yeah,
knows
they
what
like
could happen.
immediacy.
Yes.
But the other thing that's crazy, they haven't really learned from the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This whole idea of a carrier is insane. I mean, that's very 1950s. We're talking about just advances in warfare that, and I don't know. I mean, it's very interesting. I remember right after 9/11, when I took a plane, they saw the lock on the passenger door for the pilot, and I thought, wow, that was like really quick. They put all those locks on the door, because I remember when I was a kid, I used to go into the cockpit, and they used to, and then we got a little badge that said, co-pilot or something, a little sticker that we'd put on. That was pretty cool. I looked forward to that every time I got on a plane, of getting that badge and being a co-pilot. But my point to that is two things. One, we now have all these unsecured airfields. Like, what? Why, if you're going to spend money on the military, start scrapping those. Somebody has to make some hard decisions. But the voters who assemble those components, they're in districts of people who vote on the budget. But we need to obviously cover our airfields immediately. The other thing is, it's, in the 80s, I remember I first heard this. My debate coach told me this, and actually told me this in a locker room when we were working out. He said that I came back from working out. He said, the idea is, we were talking about Reagan's Star Wars. The idea that anybody has to launch a nuclear missile is insane. Like, why not just smuggle them in? And it never occurred to me before. Now, that was 1980s, like maybe 86, 96. So that was like what, 40 years ago or something, 30 years ago. So it's amazing that, like, if I were the Iranians or the Chinese or maybe even the North Koreans, I would already have snuck dirty bombs or nuclear missiles.
To the
And then,
U.S., it's pretty easy to smuggle. It seems to me.
yeah, that's
Here
what I
it's
would
more.
do.
Here it's difficult because it's harder to get into Israel. We're pretty good on our borders, except for October 7th. So I'm not going to talk about that. But Peter, lastly, because we have to go, um, are you, just as a last broad question, are you, because after Trump, whenever he said this is the death of woke, you also said it's on its deathbed, it's on its last breaths, but are you worried that what will come instead of it might be even worse?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a concern. And when I said that mostly for the US. I don't see in the Anglosphere that I mean, it's actually gotten worse in Canada, worse in Australia, worse in New Zealand, worse in the UK, far worse in the UK. I mean, talk about wearing a Star of David, man. That's totally ill advised over there. Um, so I think it's worse in every place outside of the United States. But in the United States, it's over. Now, is something else? I don't know. The future is notoriously hard to predict. I don't know.
Well, we have seen those two already attacks on Jews in the last like 2 weeks in Washington D.C. Those two young people murdered, and then those Holocaust survivor Bradley wounded from this guy with a firebomb or something. I forgot what it was, just burning these people. One was a jihadist, the other one was a crazy progressive wokist.
Yeah, that's what every time there's an attack by a jihadi, someone will always say the same thing. Someone on the left. Oh, that their beliefs had literally nothing to do with it. He's just a crazy person. 100% of the time. Like, it's like clockwork.
But if it's a white supremacist, it's because of the ideology.
Right. Right. So you can't have just a crazy person, like, so that's the other thing. People's thinking are so damaged, and they've gotten even more damaged because they're in a university system which is intentionally geared toward looking at the world of oppressed and oppressor. And I remember, I'm not going to name the name of the place, but I remember I was talking to this guy who really wanted me ousted, and he was Jewish from my position at work. And I couldn't say anything for legal reasons, but I really wanted to say, like, what the fuck? Like, don't you see you're next? Like, what is, like, but legally I couldn't say that. And yeah,
Ill-advised, but yeah, no, you're 100% right. I agree. And I think that a lot of people don't understand. So, like you said, we were next on that. He was next on that issue. We're now the Jews in America or wherever in UK. It's like you can't even say, like, don't even, like, not just don't wear a Star of David. Don't like talk in Hebrew on the phone, even quietly. Don't like, especially in like the center of London on Saturday. Don't be there. Just don't go there. Yeah, but I think now other people might be next and they don't realize it. The jihadist movement doesn't stop at Jews, and we've seen it all over. So I do think the immigration issue is something in Europe they're going to have to contend with, and that might be the next big problem, just in general.
yeah, I mean, that seems obvious to me. And if you read the work of Matt Goodwin, who's and Eric Kaufman and others,
They've both been here on our show, so
oh yeah, they're friends of mine. Matt in particular is a good friend of mine. I'm going to see him this week in Budapest. So we're not being honest about immigration. We're not being honest about, and please don't call it anti-Semitism. I just cannot.
what is the anti-Jewish?
No, just Jew hatred, much more specific. Because people who are quote unquote Semitic people say, well, how can I be anti-Semitic? I'm Semitic. I mean, it's just a weasel. It's a weasel. Call it what it
You
is.
narrowed it down to Jews; they have nowhere to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's like grooming gangs. What are you talking about grooming? There's no grooming gangs. There's like rape gangs. But it just sounds so nice. Oh, we don't want children to hear. Oh no, but you stand by while like there are hundreds of thousands of people raped and nobody's prosecuted for it. But you don't like the word. What was it? What was it? I just saw a tweet. It's like Billboard Chris was in Belgium, and he held a sign peacefully. And we've done events together. I don't. Do you know who Billboard Chris
Yeah,
is?
he walks around with this billboard on his back and on his front, right?
Yeah, children cannot consent to puberty blockers. And he was arrested. He was arrested. Meanwhile, these guys are literally reenacting October 7th, and they're like shooting people and people falling, and they're glorifying this whole thing, but they're not arrested. So either you have a system in which, like China, nobody gets any free speech and no one can say anything, or you have a system in which he can stand there with a billboard. Those guys can talk about October 7th. Like, you don't, I don't know. It's just, it seems so obvious to me. So many things seem so obvious to me, but
Yes, but for well, as you said, I think it's a sort of like almost religion. So when you're in religion, you can't see the problems in your own religion because you're a believer, and I think a lot of them are believers. They can't see, and it's sad actually because you can't really talk to them. Also, they don't want to hear.
yeah. So right there is what you said is so important. So this is what fascinates me about religious people. So you see the problem in other people's religions, but you yourself are religious and don't see that that's a problem. So it's like,
Wait, you're talking to me specifically? I actually have a lot of I got a lot of people here angry. I write a lot about the problems in Orthodox Judaism and where we need to reform stuff, and I've gotten a lot of hate for it. But I agree with you in general. It is people have a lot of problems looking at themselves and at their belief systems and where there's problems.
yeah. And I think as a basic rule, like one of the reasons I love living in Hungary so much, it's not that people here are nice. They're not really nice. It's they're truly indifferent. They're really indifferent to you. You could pretty much do anything you want, and no one, no one will do anything, say anything. Just basically follow the rules and don't do anything. Don't be an asshole. But it just seems like such a moral minimum to say I will not hate people on the basis of their race or what I perceive as their race to be. I mean, we can't even get people to agree to that.
It's yeah, and not only that, it's like the whole civil rights movement has gone backwards. Instead of don't judge person on the content on his skin color, just on the content of his character. Now it's the exact opposite. The people who carry the mantle of civil rights say you have to judge him on his ethnicity and on his skin color. You have to. If you don't, you're not anti-racist enough. I agree. I would just say that it's an interesting discussion about whether the how much community needs to come is important in terms of, if in Israel you would come and you would live here for a little bit, you would see that you walk in the street and you'll be sad. It happens to me a lot. People will come and say, why are you so sad? So that's good in a way, and sometimes you want to just get out of my life. I need these 5 minutes of peace. So it's like in Hungary it's the opposite. You're saying I wasn't in Hungary, but yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I really enjoy it. But everyone keeps telling me I should. Some people want to send me to Israel. They have this program where you go to Israel. My first thought was I wanted to go to prisons because I'm into prison. I'm doing the spectrum street epistemology in prisons here in the U.S. And then,
You want to come to the prisons here?
yeah,
I'll take you.
do you have access to prisons over there?
I know the people that work in the prison system. I'm friendly with. I don't want to say this is being recorded, but yeah,
Yeah,
we can.
I,
No problem. We can organize. We'll talk after. But
yeah,
in
I'd love
ter-
to do a spectrum street epistemology in the prisons.
you can also go to the prisons of the terrorists if you want.
I'd
That will.
love to do that, but I was told I couldn't get access to them.
You can get a special access. I will talk to you after.
Oh
But
my God, that would be awesome.
in general, you can. I would love for you to come, and we can organize an evening with you. You could come for Shabbat if you want. So, and then go to the prisons. So eat well, and then go. The food there isn't that well. So yeah,
That'd be great. Yeah.
Peter Boghossian, it's amazing talking to you.
Thank you. Pleasure. Pleasure.
Truly cool. And guys, if you have any comments, you can put in, and I will ask Peter about it. And if he feels obligated, he can answer. If not, whatever. Thank you so much for being with us, and check us out on our next episode.